Early morning, June 24th, 2025. In the Black Sea, a sudden strike unfolded. It marked an unprecedented turning point when Ukraine employed a three-layer UAV attack strategy to destroy an entire Russian coastal defense network worth tens of millions of USD in just 5 minutes. At exactly 4 a.m. on June 24th, Ukraine launched one of its most sophisticated drone operations in Crimea in 2025. The objective was to simultaneously strike two key components of Russia's coastal combat system in Crimea: two Serna-class landing craft, tasked with transporting special forces and weapons from base to the front line; a Tor M2 system, responsible for detecting and intercepting UAVs, helicopters, and cruise missiles at close range. For 3 weeks, special forces from Ukraine's Defense Intelligence Directorate had been silently tracking every movement along the eastern Crimean coastline, particularly the Kherson shoreline. Satellite imagery, reconnaissance drone signals, and analysis of enemy radar data all pointed to one conclusion: the Tor M2 air defense system was acting as a critical link in protecting the amphibious corridor near Sevastopol. Unlike the S-400 or Buk, which are designed for high-altitude and long-range interceptions, the Tor M2 specializes in low-altitude, ultra-short-range defense. It is built to destroy small, fast, low-flying targets, such as drones, helicopters, or cruise missiles, at ranges from 0.6 miles to 10 miles and altitudes from 33 feet to 32,800 feet. Therefore, if Ukraine wanted to execute a precision UAV strike on a strategic target, the Tor M2 had to be eliminated first. The challenge was not just to hit the Tor M2, but to do so without being detected. According to HUR analysis, the Tor battery was positioned on an elevated point along the Kherson coast, less than 0.9 miles from the shore, giving it full coverage of the approach corridor from the Black Sea into the Kherson area. From this location, the Tor radar could detect low-altitude targets before they crossed the horizon, enabling Russian units to intercept from offshore. This site was also the critical junction between the coastal air defense network and the naval force, making the Tor the only low-altitude watch window for the Western Peninsula. To bring the Tor M2 radar to combat readiness, the crew required at least 2 minutes to erect the radar antenna, 3 minutes to power up systems, and nearly 10 minutes to synchronize with the regional command post. During that window, the system was effectively blind to any threat. At 4:10 a.m., as the Tor M2 radar mast was being raised on a sandy stretch about 0.75 miles from the shoreline, the system was still in its startup phase, loading data and calibrating parameters, not yet capable of combat engagement. Overhead, at an altitude of 1,640 feet, a small Ukrainian reconnaissance drone, deployed earlier for continuous surveillance of the area, recorded radar emissions that had not yet locked onto any target. The data was immediately encrypted and relayed via satellite link to the command post of HUR's primary special UAV warfare unit. Instead of risking a direct approach by an armed UAV toward the Tor M2, HUR initiated a two-layer attack tactic: a decoy UAV to draw the enemy radar's attention in the wrong direction, a loitering munition to approach from outside the scan arc and exploit the system's technical blind spot. At exactly 4:11 minutes and 20 seconds a.m. from an improvised coastal launch site in Ukraine-controlled Kherson province, roughly 7.5 miles in a straight line from the target, the primary crew executed a simultaneous launch of two UAVs in salvo split mode. Immediately after leaving the rails, both UAVs cut all active emissions and switched to encrypted GPS-aided inertial navigation, maintaining course without revealing any remote control signal. They flew at less than or equal to 49 feet altitude, using sea wave clutter and coastal sand dune terrain masking to remain hidden. At the formation split point, decoy UAV-1 climbed to an altitude of 130 to 160 feet, activating a radar reflector to greatly amplify its radar cross-section, making it appear on radar as a much larger, heavy-class loitering munition. At a speed of roughly 75 miles per hour, it charged directly into the primary scan arc of the Tor M2. The radar system, not yet at 100% readiness, immediately prioritized locking onto the decoy target, holding its scan direction fixed. This created a completely blind corridor on the opposite side. Exploiting that gap, UAV-2, the loitering munition, approached from the right flank. It carried an 18-pound EFP warhead optimized to pierce the radar cabin without dispersing penetration force. At exactly 4:12 minutes and 57 seconds AM, UAV-2 closed in and struck the radar module and power system head-on. The precise detonation blew apart the entire control circuit assembly, severed the power feed lines, and collapsed the partially raised 3D antenna mast. Debris scattered more than 164 feet away. In less than 3 minutes, from the moment the radar was detected in a non-locking state, the Tor M2 was knocked out of action. The western Crimean coastal low-altitude air defense sector was now completely blind. At the Kherson post, Russian forces, reliant on the Tor M2 as their only low-altitude early warning, had lost the ability to monitor that altitude band. This was the ideal moment to initiate Phase 2, striking naval assets maneuvering at sea. At 4:14 a.m., 2 Russian Serna-class landing craft were quietly slicing through the waves with about 60 naval infantry aboard. On the command bridge of the Kerna, the navigation radar screens showed only sea clutter, no trace of any approaching object, and the fatal mistake began with that silence. The Tor M2, the only low-altitude eye in the area, had been destroyed less than 5 minutes earlier, with no system in place to replace it. The Kerna is a Russian-built high-speed landing craft, 82 feet in length, with an aluminum-steel alloy hull. Its onboard electronics are minimal: short-range navigation radar, satellite communications, and no air defense weapons. No warship was operating nearby to provide cover. These 2 vessels were part of the same military transport group, having departed from an improvised pier at Cape Phelant. Objective: land troops along the Kherson coastline, where Russia was rebuilding a recently recaptured coastal artillery position. As Serna-1 was about 1.2 nautical miles from shore, Ukraine launched 3 small unmanned surface vessels, USVs, from a covert base. Each carried an 18 to 22-pound EFP warhead with a delayed fuse designed to penetrate before detonating. Immediately after launch, the formation split. USV-1 locked onto Serna-1. USV-2 targeted Serna-2. USV-3 trailed at 1,640 foot as a reserve unit. At 4:14 minutes and 49 seconds AM, just 4 seconds after entering direct engagement range, a USV climbed at an oblique angle from below, its nose slamming into the port side of the vessel, directly amidships. The EFP warhead immediately pierced the 0.31 to 0.39 in aluminum steel alloy plating, creating a hypervelocity penetrator jet that tore through internal bulkheads before detonating in the confined space. The shockwave and high-velocity shrapnel tore through the fuel lines, igniting a spreading fire within seconds. The blast completely destroyed the midsection, where troop seating, auxiliary fuel tanks, and carried equipment were located. Overpressure inside the sealed compartment collapsed the ceiling, blew off the aft doors, and triggered a reverse suction effect. The vessel began listing to port before slowly sinking. At 4:15 minutes and 30 seconds AM, within 41 seconds, the entire hull slipped beneath the surface. Some Marines jumped overboard, while others went down with the compartment. Russian naval radar lost the vessel's signal immediately. Exactly 10 seconds after the first explosion, The second USV locked onto the remaining vessel. Serna number 2 was moving about 656 feet from the first Serna. Upon detecting the blast, it immediately altered course 15 degrees to port, but it was too late. It was already in the USV's firing lane. USV-2 did not use a directional penetration warhead. Instead, it carried a fragmentation warhead with a contact fuse. Objective, the command cabin, where navigation systems, communications, and short-range radar were concentrated. At 4 hours 15 minutes and 52 seconds AM, USV-2 slammed into the forward port side of Serna number 2. Directly beneath the cockpit's bullet-resistant windows. The blast produced a dual penetration effect. Heat and fragments punched through the 0.31-inch steel wall, flooding the sealed bridge with lethal force. Flames erupted, engulfing the control panels. The navigation system, radar, and all electronic controls were destroyed within seconds. The vessel did not sink, but the entire bridge crew was forced to cut throttle and abandon navigation. The drive shaft stopped turning. The ship drifted helplessly on the waves, awaiting rescue. The third USV, pre-programmed as the kill shot, no longer needed to be deployed. The combat scenario concluded in just 3 minutes. The total strike time was under 5 minutes, during which Ukraine severed Russia's entire amphibious landing corridor at Kherson. Significantly, neither of the loitering munitions was controlled in real time. They operated almost entirely autonomously. HUR engineers had pre-programmed flight routes, activation times, approach altitudes, and aim points based on reconnaissance data gathered weeks in advance. The Kherson Cape Phelant area lies in the southwest of the Crimean Peninsula, near the strategic city of Sevastopol. It had been established by Russia as a forward assault staging complex, with rapid troop landing beaches, shortcut routes to the Black Sea, and deployment points for coastal artillery and medium-range rocket launchers. By striking here, Ukraine not only inflicted immediate damage, but also forced Russia to redeploy its entire defense network, delaying recovery and creating a tactical gap for follow-on operations. Russia was compelled to do 2 things: pull its coastal air defense systems at least 3.1 miles inland to avoid another close-in UAV attack like on June 24th. This removed the Tor radar's coverage over the shoreline. Halt small boat landing operations due to the lack of radar cover and the fear of continued UAV strikes. This operation also marked a major upgrade in how Ukraine organized UAV strikes, no longer as isolated units, but as coordinated multi-layered teams. Such organization prevented Russian air defenses from distinguishing the true threat, resulting in delayed responses or being hit before readiness could be achieved. From a purely military standpoint, the June 24th strike was a localized raid, but strategically, it sent a clear message. Crimea is no longer safe, whether onshore or offshore. Every air defense system, every landing craft, every garrison can be struck without warning. It was proof that Ukraine had shifted from point strikes to inflict damage to system strikes to collapse operational structure. And behind that was an entire Russian logistics radar artillery chain forced into retreat. Simultaneously with the Crimea attack, Ukrainian UAVs were also reported operating over Skadovsk, Melitopol, and Novocherkassk. Western media imagery showed multiple Russian air defense bases along the Black Sea coast moving deeper inland, small warships restricted from operating close to shore. The southern Ukrainian coastline briefly opened up, no longer locked down. Thus, Crimea, once considered an impregnable fortress, was no longer immune to UAV strikes.